How about number 4, most valuable dad? They express appreciation for their children on a regular basis. Yeah, you tell your children you love them. You tell your children you're proud of them. You know, when Jesus was baptized, his heavenly Father, what a great example, right? His heavenly Father said, "This is my beloved Son. This is the Son I love, in whom I'm well pleased." So the Father speaks down from heaven and says, "I love you, Son, and I'm so pleased with you, Son." I mean, that is an example. You know, my dad was World War II generation type of guy. And he passed away, you know, if Luke's 30, so he passed away 17 years ago. And, I do miss my dad. But there's one thing about my dad. He would show his love by working hard, by being home at night, by loving his wife, and I always felt like he loved me. But one thing about the World War II generation, they were different. You know, they weren't lovey-feely. He wasn't a hug you, and he wasn't like, "I love you" type of guy at all. He hardly ever said that. Well, my dad contracted terminal illness, lung cancer, and so I knew that his days were limited, and I thought, this is what I'll do. I'll call him every week and just talk to him on the phone, because there's coming a day when I won't be able to talk to him. And so I call him every week, and at the end of every conversation, I'd say, "Dad, I love you." And they said, "Well, thank you for the phone call." And there we go. And, you know, this went on for 8, 9, 10 times. I would say, close the conversation, "Dad, I love you." And then, you know, about the 8th, 9th, 10th time, he would say it back. And then we did that for a couple years before he passed away. And "I love you, Dad. I love you too. I love you too." And it was like music in my ears, you know. But I was a son initiating this. You know, he should have been, honestly, as a father. And so, fathers, may I just encourage you, if you have trouble, just start telling your children that you love them. You know, my wife, you know, her dad, very quiet, very shy, kind of a withdrawn type of guy, and share your experience.
The very first time I ever remember my father telling me he loved me was on my wedding day. We were lined up in the hallway of the church getting ready to walk down that middle aisle. And he had my arm in his arm, and he looked at me and he said, "I love you, Rhonda." Very first time I ever remember him saying that. You know, and as time went on, you know, you just want so much for your father to be able to just tell you those words, and he never hardly ever did, hardly ever. But I would always talk to him on the phone after we were married, always close with, "Dad, I love you." You know, he'd be real quiet. But when my dad got to be about in his late 50s, early 60s, there was a shift in him. And he started opening up more and just reciprocating those words, "I love you." And then in the end, my dad passed away 2 Julys ago. But the last couple years before his death, wow, there was just an incredible shift in my dad. And he'd talk to me, and he'd weep as he would tell me, "I love you, Rhonda. I love you, Rhonda." So for both of us, we just kept sowing into the hearts of our fathers. And, you know, they say there's nothing like a father's voice. And I bet you every woman in this room can remember when her dad told her that he loved her. And my husband, every man in this room, you can remember. There's a great statement. Every boy needs to hear, "Son, you've got what it takes." And every daughter needs to hear, "You're worth fighting for." Those are awesome. It's amazing to me the power and the impact we have on our children's lives.
You know, they've done studies. Did you know fathers have the greatest impact in the life of their daughters, even more so than the mothers? And so, fathers, let me just encourage you with your son, with your daughter, that you just stay engaged, that you learn biblical lessons here today and biblical encouragements. You know, even though you're flawed, and we all are, and you've made mistakes, we all have. Maybe you've even made some big mistakes, okay? But you know what? My wife shared this in the first service. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. You can start again. You can begin again. Just like I made a decision, as a son. All right, starting right now, every time I talk to my dad, I'm going to tell him I love him. I just made that decision. And sure enough, I did that, and that somehow cracked his armor, and maybe it was very difficult the very first time for him to say, and I love you too, Tim. But I knew he loved me. He just had a hard time expressing it. But I made the decision, all right, from this day forward, this is what I'm going to do. And maybe you can do that today as a father. From this day forward, I'm going to tell my kids every week or every day in some way, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're great. You've got what it takes if you're talking to your son. You got what it takes. You can do this, son. or to your daughter. You're worth fighting for. You're my little princess. You know, my son was always my little buddy, and my daughter was always my little princess, and, just express my love that way. And you don't have to stay as flawed as you are. You know, you can get better. You agree with that, men? We can get better as fathers. Praise